So, apparently this is the period of the channel where I, for some reason, talk about anime with copious amounts of male nudity in them. First it was Grand Blue, and now Undead Unluck. Maybe I'll redo Golden Kamuy next to keep up this questionable trend. Don't know. But yes, Undead Unluck, the shounen of the season. Since, you know, every anime season must have an isekai and a shounen. Them's the rules, I don't make them, I just work here. And it's not like the seasonal shounen shows have yet to fall to the level of your average seasonal isekai, so there's that as well. That being said though, it's still not the most inventive of genres, and in that regard Undead Unluck is no different either. It's a high-budget, well-done battle shonen through and through. But before I get further into it, hi, it's me again. Sorry for the interruption so early on, this time for the dreaded subscription statistic, and it's still not a very good split with about 95% of viewers not being subscribed, so if you do find yourself enjoying the content, please do hit that button, as for small channels like this one, it really does help. And now I shan't take any more of your time with statistical nonsense. Back to the scheduled programming. Now, yes, I may be somewhat indifferent to shonen anime. I mean, they are, as a general rule of thumb, pretty good, and few even reach the level of being great, but at the same time, it is one of those seasonal genres, so the truly great shows are few and far between, as there are just so damn many of them. Sadly, for Undead Unluck, it falls into the group of shonen that is merely pretty good. Don't get me wrong, it does mean that it's still better than your typical seasonal average, but it won't be winning any awards either, especially since the story feels a little, lackluster. It's one of those superpower fighting anime full of raunchy humor and actually pretty fun character dynamics, and the superpowers, if you can call them that, are one of the more interesting power systems in shonen, since all of them come with a suffix of undead, unluck, etc., which in and of itself is not interesting unless you happen to be a language nerd, but it being a negative form indicates the actually interesting side of the powers. These powers are of the monkey spore variety. Everything has a downside, some of which are kind of severe. And these downsides and rules, bound to any and all powers in the show, at least so far, leads to some rather fun battle sequences, which tend to be a little more tactical and less hit them until they die kind of thing. It's more fight but observe, try and figure out the enemy's rule so that you can exploit it. It reminds me of some of the JoJo's fights, where it's equally battle of brain and brawn, at least until the time comes to really bash the other guy's face in, and, well, reminding me of the way JoJo's does things is never a bad sign, and yes, there is a further reason why I was immediately reminded of JoJo's. But you may have noticed that I haven't talked about the story of Undead Unluck yet, and there's a good reason for that. The story is honestly kind of dull, and is easily the worst aspect of the anime so far. It's not like the story of Andy and Yuko would be badly written or anything, it's just that after you've seen the other 1001 shonen shows, it just all gets a little stale. It also doesn't help that the first episode is an absolute blast, after which things kind of stagnate. There is a sort of a twist few episodes in, but in typical shonen fashion, it can be seen a mile off, and even if it couldn't, it's not like it's a twist of the century or anything. And if I'm being honest, so far, I at least feel like the story might have actually been better without it. The beginning of Andy and Fuko's running away from the organization, whose goal was just to protect the innocents from the potentially destructive abilities the pair possesses, had a cool anti-hero vibe, which was further emphasized by the no punches pulled Deadpool-esque humor that was both stupid and stupidly funny at the same time, somehow made the show more endearing to me. And everything was initially pointing towards that kind of an approach. The first episode especially having that feel of an LCD trip-fueled insanity made it into something hilarious with cool fight scenes and, let's go with interesting character dynamics. But instead of it going full balls to the walls batshit insane, the only thing that has since improved is the character dynamics, while everything else just ended up feeling kind of like a wet fart. That being said, I do really like the characters. Nobody is the usual goody two-shoes Tanjiro of the group, and until very recently there also wasn't the best and greatest at everything chosen one either, and whilst Victor is far from the chosen one, I had hoped that we'd escape the ability to overcome any obstacle ever. Wannabe is gonna trump card dynamic, but alas. But even with yet another uninspiring addition to this pile that is starting to lean far more towards the miss side of hit and miss, the rest of the cast, at least the ones we've gotten to know so far, are pretty fun. Andy is a great main character with a really interesting power of immortality that he can use in very creative ways. The man of undetermined centuries under his non-existent belt has that feeling of something more than just your average human, even when he isn't growing out of his severed neck in what is frankly a stunning piece of animation. That and the man really feels like somebody who has lived for centuries. He has his own code of justice and honor and can feel really grown up when he isn't making dick jokes or just wanting to die. That and the frankly bizarre relationship he has going on with Fuko is something I find weirdly endearing, if at times questionable. But at the same time, I can see how some people might find it annoying, or, knowing Twitter, problematic, the latter admittedly being a moot point since Twitter would probably find a rock in the middle of bumfuck nowhere to be problematic, but especially in the very beginning the pair can raise some eyebrows. But as fun as Andy is, I think Fuko is still my favourite of the show, and I'm clearly not just talking about the characters in order to avoid further touching on the rather dull story. I'm trying to pay attention to the good stuff, okay? You can't be mad at that. But yeah, Fuko is great. Were it not for Frieren and Fern, she might even be best girl of the season. A deeply traumatized girl of 18 who, amongst other things, accidentally killed her parents and a few hundred other people on the side as well. She starts off as a shutting, afraid of the world, or rather herself in relation with the world, only to get thrust straight into the madness of Andy in a bargain to try and finally provide him with the sweet release of death. But on the note of talking about the good stuff in an effort to combat negativity, I do have to touch on the animation a bit, no matter how dumb it feels to just go, yeah, look, it's pretty. David Productions really did a stunning job with Undead Unluck, to a point where I'm told the best way to experience it might just be the anime, since it does go a long way to elevating the otherwise meh story. Also, the involvement of the studio is the other reason why I was reminded of JoJo's more often than not while watching, since, you know, David Productions is best known for being the studio behind the more recent anime adaptations of JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. And it honestly does show during Undead Unluck as well, and not just in the animation itself, having that air of JoJo's, you know, bold movements and strong lines, that stuff. But in the pacing of the already amazing fight scenes as well. The action is dynamic and absolutely mad, but unlike a lot of shounen, the figuring shit out mid-fight tends to have a lot more substance to it. It's not just internal monologue for days, or worse yet, stopping or slowing down time for the sake of the monologue and destroying the otherwise great fight dynamic in the process. Looking at you, Demon Slayer. And while I don't know if it's the same in the manga, the anime at least manages to keep the feeling of the fight going on even when there might not be any actual fighting. It's disengage and think while harrying the enemy instead of we shall now stand 10 meters apart and both have our monologues to make sure the audience understands exactly what's going on. They trust their audience to be able to follow a fight even without dedicating entire segments to explain every minute detail, which as a whole translates to more fluid battles, which I for one can appreciate. It's not like the whole shonen thing is gone and done for, it just feels less prevalent. But alas, the good things can only carry it so far. At the end of the day, Undead Unluck is just another shonen, which normally I'd be all for, but the unique start put a break on this particular one, being a lot better than the rest of it so far has been. The good guys come out on top even in the bleakest of situations, the story is largely predictable, and the world is in need of saving. The only saving grace from the great shonen template is that for once willpower does not overcome all and friendship is not magic, although we have already had the power of dreams bullshit. It's ruthless and selfish people trying to do what is right, because no matter how twisted and self-serving they may be, it would rain on their parade somewhat if the world were indeed to come to an end. The show does do some things quite well, but still falls short of true greatness. It honestly kind of felt like Bushel in this regard. It's perfectly adequate as is, but instead of embracing what makes it good, the story errs on the side of caution, which just leads to heaps of unrealized potential, which is honestly the biggest thing that bothers me about Undead Unluck. It could have been so much more, and with the characters and frankly amazing work David Productions put into it, it damn well should have been so much more. It's one of those stories that I really want to like, but so far the negatives just outweigh the positives and it ends up being just another shonen. Maybe it's me getting older and not being in the target audience anymore, or maybe it's simply that having seen the other 1,000 well-executed battle shonens, adding another one into that pile no longer hits as hard as it ought to have. 7 out of 10, perfectly adequate battle shonen if that's your shtick. If not, you won't be losing out on much if you skip it. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, I would encourage you to again subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, it really does help out, and maybe we can even break that goal of 1000 before the end of the year. If you have already subscribed, thank you so much, and you can help further by commenting your thoughts down below, because every interaction helps to appease the algorithm god. Like this if you liked it, dislike if you didn't, check the links in the description if you want to engage with me outside of YouTube. With this, I have been Cheese, and I'll see you next time. Ta-ta for now.